Jake Morrison stood in front of the big screen on his ship's bridge. The numbers on the display made his stomach hurt. 17 worlds had fallen to the enemy in just 2 months. 17 entire planets full of people. All gone. The Kethvar. Aliens were winning, and they were winning fast. Their ships had some kind of special protection that made human weapons almost useless. Every time the Federation forces tried a new attack, the alien ships learned how to stop it within minutes. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. He had been awake for 36 hours straight, trying to find a way to fight back. His fleet of 43 ships was all that stood between the Kethvar and 3 more human colonies. The aliens had them outnumbered 3-1, maybe worse. "Sir, Admiral Carter wants to see you right away," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and worried eyes. Jake could see the fear she was trying to hide. "Tell her I'll be there in 5 minutes," Jake said. He knew what this meeting was about. They were going to talk about giving up. The walk to the meeting room felt longer than usual. Jake passed crew members who looked tired and scared. They had been running from the Kethvar for weeks, fighting when they had to, but mostly just trying. To stay alive. Admiral Lisa Carter was waiting in the meeting room with 12 other ship captains. She was a tall woman with gray hair and hard eyes. Jake had served under her for 8 years, and he had never seen her look this worried. "Gentlemen, ladies," Carter began when everyone was seated, "we need to face facts. We're losing this war. Badly. The Kethvar have better weapons, better shields, and more ships. Every day we wait, more people die." Captain Ryan Hughes spoke up from across the table. "What are you saying, Admiral? That we should surrender?" Carter was quiet for a long moment. "I'm saying we need to think about it. The Federation Council is already talking about peace terms. Maybe if we give the Kethvar what they want, they'll leave the other worlds alone." "What they want is everything," said Captain Steve Walsh. "They don't just take over planets. They eat them. They turn every living thing into part of their hive mind." Jake felt sick thinking about it. The Kethvar weren't just conquerors. They were something much worse. They took over people's minds and made them into slaves. Whole civilizations just disappeared, becoming part of the alien collective. "I know what they are," Carter said quietly. "But what choice do we have? We can't fight them with what we have." That's when the alarm started going off. Lieutenant Brooks' voice came over the speakers. "Admiral, we're picking up something strange on long-range sensors. There's a ship coming toward us, but it doesn't match any Federation design." Carter frowned. "Kethvar? No, ma'am. It's human, but it's old. Really old. The computer is having trouble identifying it." Everyone in the room looked at each other. An old human ship? That didn't make sense. All the old ships had been destroyed or scrapped years ago. "Put it on the main screen," Carter ordered. They all hurried back to the bridge. The big screen showed a fuzzy image of something moving through space. It was hard to see clearly, but Jake could tell it was huge, bigger than any ship he had ever seen. Computer ran a full scan. Carter said the computer worked for several minutes before responding. Scan complete. Ship design matches theoretical profiles for Project Wanderer. Confidence level, 78%. The bridge went completely quiet. Project Wanderer was a legend, a story that old spacers told in bars. Supposedly, hundreds of years ago, Earth had built a secret ship and sent it away on some mysterious mission. Most people thought it was just a story. "That's impossible," Hughes whispered. "The Wanderer is just a myth." Amy Brooks was working at her station, pulling up old files. "Sir, I found something." "There are records, but they're really old, and most of them are classified. It says here that Project Wanderer was a real thing, launched in 2387. The ship was supposed to carry humanity's best scientists and soldiers on a mission to develop new weapons. That was over 300 years ago, Walsh said. Even if it was real, everyone on that ship would be dead by now. Jake stared at the screen. The ship was getting closer, and he could see it more clearly now. It looked like nothing he had ever seen before. The hull seemed to shift and change, like it was made of liquid metal. Strange lights moved across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. "It's beautiful," Amy said softly. She was right. Despite everything, the ship was beautiful in a way that made no sense. It moved through space like it was dancing, not flying. Energy readings from their sensors were going crazy, showing power levels that should have been impossible. "Admiral," came a voice from the communications station. "I'm trying to contact the ship, but I'm getting no response. They're not answering any of our signals." Carter stepped forward. "Keep trying. If that really is the Wanderer, we need to know who's on board and what they want." The mysterious ship continued to approach. As it got closer, Jake could see just how massive it really was. It was at least twice the size of their biggest battleship, but it moved with the grace of a small fighter. The hull seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, making it hard to focus on. "Look at the sensors," Amy said, her voice full of wonder. "The ship is putting out more energy than our entire fleet combined. How is that possible?" Jake didn't have an answer. None of them did. They could only watch as the legendary ship moved past their fleet, heading straight for the Kethver forces that were waiting at the edge of the system. The alien ships had been sitting there for days, probably planning their next attack. They had been confident, knowing that the human fleet was trapped and outgunned. But now something had changed. The Wanderer was moving toward them with purpose, like a predator that had finally found its prey. "This changes everything," Carter said quietly. Jake nodded. For the first time in months, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The ship they had dismissed as Folklore was real, and it was heading into battle. Whatever happened next, the war was about to become very different. Captain Helen Torres opened her eyes for the first time in 300 years. The stasis pod made a soft hissing sound as it opened, and she took her first breath of ship air in centuries. Her body felt strange, different than she remembered. "Welcome back, Helen," said a familiar voice. It was Danny Cooper, her old friend from Earth, but Danny wasn't standing beside her pod. His voice came from the ship itself. He had become part of the Wanderer. "How long?" Helen asked, sitting up slowly. Her muscles felt weak, but were getting stronger by the second. 312 years, 4 months, 6 days, Danny replied. "The galaxy has changed a lot while we were gone." Helen stood up and looked around the awakening chamber. 46 other pods were opening, releasing the crew that had volunteered for humanity's most secret mission. These people had been Earth's best and brightest, chosen to find a way to save their species from extinction. Dr. Alan Parker was the first to join her. He was the ship's head scientist, a thin man with kind eyes who had once taught physics at Earth's top university. Now he looked exactly the same as the day they had entered stasis, but Helen could sense that he had changed in ways that went deeper than appearance. "The mission was successful," Alan said, reading her thoughts. That was new. He couldn't do that before they left Earth. "We found what we were looking for, and much more." More pods opened. Engineer Katie Logan stepped out, stretching her arms. She had been responsible for keeping the ship running during their long journey to the edge of the galaxy. Next came Chief Tactical Officer Pete Rodriguez, a former soldier who had volunteered when Earth's government explained what they needed. "Danny, bring us up to speed," Helen said. "What's happening out there?" The ship's walls came alive with images and information. Helen saw the war that was raging in the galaxy, the Kethver invasion that was destroying world after world. She saw the Federation fleet that was trapped and outnumbered, fighting a hopeless battle against an enemy. Couldn't understand. The Kethver are worse than the threat we left Earth to fight, Danny explained. They're not just invaders. They're reality parasites. They consume entire civilizations and add their knowledge to a collective mind that spans multiple dimensions. Helen felt a chill run down her spine. During their long journey to the galaxy's edge, they had encountered something similar. The ancient beings they found there, the ones who called themselves the architects, had warned them about this kind of enemy. Are they the same species the architects told us about? Asked Dr. Emma Collins, the ship's expert on alien life. She had just awakened from her own pod and was already studying the data Danny was showing them. Similar, but not the same, Alan answered. The Kethver learned from that ancient species. They became something even more dangerous. Helen walked too. The ship's command center and the others followed. The Wanderer looked nothing like the ship they had left Earth in. During their journey, they had rebuilt it using technology they barely understood. The walls seemed to be made of living metal that responded to thought. The controls were operated by mind rather than hands. Show me what we've become, Helen said. Danny activated the ship's internal sensors, and Helen saw her crew as they really were now. They still looked human, but they had changed in fundamental ways. Their bodies could phase in and out of normal matter. They could manipulate energy with their thoughts. Their minds were connected to the ship's systems in ways that made them part of the Wanderer itself. We're still human, said Lieutenant Commander Greg Hayes, who had just joined them. We made sure of that, but we're also something more. Helen remembered the choice they had made during their journey. The architects had offered them power beyond imagination, technology that could reshape reality itself. But they had demanded a price. Humanity would have to give up their individual consciousness and become a collective mind. Helen and her crew had refused. Instead, they had found a third option. They kept their human emotions, their individual thoughts, their personal connections to each other. But they had also gained abilities that made them something new. The Federation fleet is in trouble, Katie reported from the engineering station. They're facing a Kethver force that outnumbers them badly, and their weapons can't penetrate the alien shields. What about their leaders? Helen asked. Admiral Lisa Carter is in command. She's a good officer, but she's never faced anything like this. The Kethver have adaptive technology that learns from every attack. Helen nodded. She had read about the Kethver abilities in the ship's database. They were a hive mind that shared all knowledge instantly across their entire species. When one ship learned how to defend against a weapon, all ships immediately gained that defense. That's their strength, said Dr. Collins, but it's also their weakness. A hive mind can't understand individual creativity. They can't predict what someone will do if that person isn't part of their collective. And we're definitely not part of their collective, Pete said with a grim smile. Helen looked at her crew. These 47 people had volunteered to leave Earth forever, to journey into the unknown and find a way to protect humanity. They had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, but the cost had been enormous. They could never go home. They were no longer quite human in the traditional sense, but they were still human where it mattered most. In their hearts, in their loyalty to each other, in their determination to protect the innocent. What's our tactical situation? Helen asked. Pete brought up a display that showed the local area of space. The Federation fleet was clustered together, trying to protect the civilian ships behind them. The Kethver forces were spread out in a hunting formation, slowly closing in for the kill. The Federation has 43 combat ships, Pete reported. The Kethver have about 130, plus support vessels. The aliens have been playing with them, testing their defenses and learning their tactics. "They're treating it like a game," said Commander Kelly Wright, the ship's strategic officer. She had been a war planner for Earth's military before joining the mission. "The Kethver think they've already won." Helen studied the tactical display. The Federation ships were using standard battle formations, the kind taught in military academies. Across the galaxy, they were brave and well-trained, but they were fighting an enemy that had consumed hundreds of civilizations. The Kethver had seen every tactic, every strategy, every trick that conventional military thinking could produce, but they had never seen what the Wanderer could do. "Prepare for battle," Helen ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy what humanity learned in the dark between stars." The ship responded to her command. Systems that had been dormant during their approach began to come online. The Wanderer's hull started to change, becoming something that existed partially outside normal space and time. Energy flowed through channels that defied the laws of physics. Helen felt the ship's consciousness merge with her own. Danny's presence was there, along with the accumulated knowledge of their 300-year journey. She could sense her crew taking their positions, each person becoming part of the ship's living system. "The Kethver are about to learn something," Helen said softly. "Humanity doesn't give up. We don't surrender. And we never stop fighting for the people we love." The Wanderer moved forward, heading toward a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. Behind them, the Federation fleet watched in amazement as the legendary ship prepared to face an enemy that had never known defeat. Helen smiled. The Kethver were about to discover that legends sometimes come true. The Kethver overmind felt something it had not experienced in millions of years: confusion. The collective consciousness that connected every alien in their vast empire suddenly encountered data that made no sense. A single ship was approaching their fleet. The vessel appeared to be human in origin, but the readings were impossible. The ship seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. Its energy output was beyond measurement. Worst of all, the collective mind could not penetrate its defenses to learn about the technology inside. "Another primitive vessel approaches," announced Hive Queen Zethka, the local commander of the Kethver fleet. "Prepare to consume its knowledge as we have done with all the others." But the Overmind was not so certain. In their long history of consuming civilizations, they had never encountered anything like this ship. It moved through space in ways that defied their understanding of physics. On the Wanderer's bridge, Captain Helen Torres stood calmly as her ship approached the alien fleet. Around her, the crew worked at stations that responded to thought rather than touch. The ship itself had become an extension of their combined will. "They're trying to scan us," reported Lieutenant Commander Greg Hayes from the tactical station. "Their probe beams can't get through our dimensional shielding." "Good," Helen said. "Let them wonder what we are for a little while longer." The Kethver fleet was massive. Over 100 ships of various sizes, from small fighters to huge battleships that could destroy planets. They had conquered galaxy after galaxy with these forces, adding the knowledge of each defeated species to their collective mind. "Captain," said Dr. Alan Parker, "I'm detecting something interesting about their fleet formation. They're not just arranged for battle. They're positioned to create a massive psychic net. They plan to capture and absorb the consciousness of everyone in the Federation fleet." Helen's jaw tightened. She had read about the Kethver's methods. They didn't just kill their enemies. They trapped their minds and made them part of the hive consciousness, forcing them to serve their conquerors forever. "Not if we stop them first," she said. "Greg, prepare the reality anchors." "Reality anchors ready, Captain?" Helen took a deep breath. What they were about to do had never been attempted in combat before. During their long journey to the galaxy's edge, they had learned to manipulate the basic forces of existence. Space and time became tools they could use. But using such power in battle was dangerous, even for them. "Danny," Helen called to the ship's AI consciousness. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 300 years," Danny replied. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and sadness. He had volunteered to merge his consciousness with the ship so that human emotion and intuition could guide their incredible technology. The first HFY squadron moved to intercept the Wanderer. 20 sleek alien ships, each one armed with weapons that had destroyed countless civilizations. They fired simultaneously, sending energy beams that could cut through any known material. The beams passed right through the Wanderer without causing any damage. Helen smiled. "Show them what we learned from the architects." The ship's hull began to glow with strange patterns of light. Reality around the Wanderer started to bend and twist. The laws of physics that governed normal space became merely suggestions that could be ignored. The HFY ships found themselves in a zone where their weapons no longer worked the way they were supposed to. Energy dissipated harmlessly. Matter became unstable. Their adaptive shields tried to compensate, but there was nothing to adapt to. The Wanderer was rewriting the rules of existence in the local area of space. "Impossible," whispered Hive Queen. "Zethka, no species has ever developed such technology." Helen heard the alien's transmission and decided to respond. "You're right," she said, broadcasting on all frequencies. "No species has developed this technology. We didn't develop it either. We inherited it from beings who transcended physical existence 1 billion years ago, and we learned how to use it while keeping our humanity." The first HFY squadron tried to retreat, but they discovered that distance had become meaningless around the Wanderer. No matter which direction they flew, they remained in the same relative position to the human ship. "You have entered reality storm," Helen explained, her voice reaching every ship in the alien fleet. "Normal physics no longer apply here. Your adaptive technology cannot learn to counter something that operates outside the universe you understand." She gave a simple command to her crew: remove them. The 20 HFY ships simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not disintegrated, but removed from reality as if they had never been there at all. The Overmind felt the loss of their consciousness. Like a physical wound, for the first time in their species' history, the HFY experienced fear. "What are you?" demanded Hive Queen Zethka. "We are what humanity became when we refused to give up our souls," Helen replied. "We are what you get when you combine human stubbornness with technology that can reshape existence itself." The main HFY fleet began to move, but their formation was already breaking apart. The loss of 20 ships, without any explanation, had shaken their collective confidence. The Overmind was trying to process data that made no sense according to their understanding of the universe. On the Federation flagship, Admiral Lisa Carter watched in amazement as the legendary ship engaged the enemy. Her sensors were showing readings that her equipment couldn't properly interpret. "Are you getting this?" she asked Captain Ryan Hughes. "I'm recording everything, but I don't understand half of what I'm seeing," Hughes replied. "That ship is doing things that should be impossible." Lieutenant Amy Brooks was working frantically at her station. "Admiral, I'm picking up a communication from the Wanderer. They're sending us modified weapons frequencies." The data that came through their communication systems was unlike anything the Federation had ever seen. Complex mathematical formulas that hurt to look at, energy patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, and tactical information that revealed weaknesses in HFY technology that no one had ever noticed. How do they know all this? Carter wondered aloud. The answer came from the Wanderer itself. Commander Kelly Wright's voice reached the Federation fleet. "We've been studying your enemy for 300 years. We know how they think, how they fight, and how to beat them. Follow our lead, and we'll show you how to win this war." The HFY fleet was trying to surround the Wanderer, but they were discovering that normal tactical thinking didn't work against an enemy that could manipulate reality. Ships that tried to flank the human vessel found themselves somehow in front of it. Instead, attack formations dissolved as space itself became unreliable. Major Chris Davis led a team of enhanced humans in a boarding action that defied belief. They simply walked through the hull of a HFY command ship as if it were made of air. Inside, they moved through the alien vessel like ghosts, immune to the weapons and defenses that the HFY threw at them. The aliens had never faced an enemy that could become incorporeal at will. Their energy weapons passed harmlessly through the human borders. Their biological attacks had no effect on people who could exist partially outside normal space-time. Chris and his team reached the ship's command center and began downloading information directly from the HFY computers. They learned about the aliens' plans, their technology, and most importantly, their weaknesses. "Captain Torres," Chris reported back to the Wanderer, "I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that we can beat them. The bad news is that this isn't just one fleet. They've got reinforcements coming from parallel realities where they already won." Helen felt a chill at those words. The architects had warned them about enemies that could exist across multiple dimensions. The HFY weren't just threatening one galaxy. They were a cancer that spread across different versions of reality itself. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Maybe an hour before the first reinforcements arrive. After that, we'll be facing fleets from dozens of parallel universes." Helen looked at her crew. 47 enhanced humans against an enemy that spanned multiple realities. The odds were impossible, but that had never stopped humanity before. "Then we'd better finish this quickly," she said. "Danny, prepare the dimensional anchors. It's time to show the HFY what happens when they threaten our galaxy." The Wanderer began to glow even brighter as systems that had been held in reserve came online. The ship was preparing to exist simultaneously across multiple realities, ready to fight the HFY in every dimension where they posed a threat. The real battle was about to begin. Reality began to tear apart around the Wanderer as dimensional rifts opened throughout the battle zone. The HFY reinforcements were arriving, and they were coming from versions of the universe where humanity had already been defeated. Captain Helen Torres stood at the center of her ship's command area. Her consciousness merged with the vessel's incredible systems. Around her, the crew worked in perfect harmony, each person's enhanced abilities combining with the others to create something greater than the sum of its parts. "Dimensional rifts opening," reported Lieutenant Nicole Evans from the navigation station. "I count 47 separate tiers in spacetime. They're bringing through fleets from parallel realities." Helen watched the tactical display as hundreds of new HFY ships poured through the rifts. In some of those other realities, the aliens had consumed entire galaxies. In others, they had destroyed Earth itself and added humanity's knowledge to their collective consciousness. "They're not just fighting us," Helen realized. "They're trying to merge all the parallel versions of this battle into one overwhelming victory." Dr. Emma Collins looked up from her station, where she was analyzing the alien reinforcements. "Captain, I'm detecting something disturbing. Some of those ships contain human consciousness that's been absorbed by the HFY. In those other realities, our people were defeated and turned into part of the hive mind." The thought made Helen's stomach turn. Somewhere in those alien ships were versions of people she knew, people she had sworn to protect, twisted into slaves of the collective consciousness. "We're not going to let that happen here," she said firmly. "Danny, activate the reality storm generators. Full power." "Helen, if we do that, we'll be fighting across dozens of parallel dimensions simultaneously," Danny warned. "The strain on the ship and crew will be enormous. We don't have a choice. If we let them establish a foothold in this reality, they'll use it as a base to attack all the others." The Wanderer began to change in ways that hurt to look at. The ship existed in normal space, but it was also becoming something that transcended the usual limits of reality. Helen could feel her consciousness expanding, touching versions of herself in other dimensions where different choices had led to different outcomes. On the Federation flagship, Admiral Lisa Carter watched in awe as space itself seemed to come alive around the legendary ship. Reality storms raged across the battle zone, and her sensors showed impossible readings. "Admiral, we're receiving tactical data from the Wanderer," reported Captain Ryan Hughes. "They're showing us how to target the dimensional rifts." The information that flowed into the Federation fleet's computers was beyond anything they had ever encountered. It showed them how to modify their weapons to affect targets that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. More importantly, it gave them the ability to close the rifts that the Kethfer were using to bring in reinforcements. "Follow their lead," Carter ordered. "All ships, focus fire on the dimensional weak points they're highlighting." The Federation fleet began to fight with capabilities they had never possessed before. Their weapons, enhanced by technology from the Wanderer, could now strike at enemies that existed partially outside normal spacetime. Ships that had been helpless against Kethvar adaptive shields suddenly became effective in battle. But the real fight was happening on a scale that conventional sensors couldn't detect. The Wanderer was battling Kethvar forces across multiple realities simultaneously, each version of the ship fighting a slightly different version of the same battle. Major Chris Davis led his enhanced boarding teams through chaos that defied description. They moved through Kethvar ships that existed in several dimensions at once, fighting enemies that sometimes attacked from parallel realities. The aliens were confused and terrified by humans who could step between different versions of reality at will. "Captain, I've reached the primary hive node," Chris reported. "The Kethver are using it to coordinate their multi-dimensional attack. If we can shut it down, we can sever their connection between realities." "Do it," Helen commanded. Chris and his team worked to disable the alien device, but they discovered something unexpected. The hive node contained human consciousness from the parallel realities where Earth had been defeated. Hundreds of thousands of human minds were trapped inside. The Kethver collective, forced to serve their conquerors. "Helen, we've got a problem," Chris said. "There are people in here, humans from the other realities. They're still alive, still aware, but they're prisoners inside the alien collective consciousness." Helen felt a surge of anger and determination. It wasn't enough to defeat the Kethver in this reality. They had to save the humans who had been captured in all the other versions of the battle. "Can you free them?" she asked. "Maybe, but it'll require us to enter the collective consciousness ourselves. There's a risk we might get trapped in there, too." Helen didn't hesitate. "Do it. We don't leave anyone behind, no matter which reality they come from." Dr. Collins worked frantically at her station, developing a way to safely enter the Kethver collective consciousness. "I think I can create a psychic shield using our enhanced abilities. We can go in, free the human prisoners, and get out before the collective can trap us." The plan was incredibly dangerous. The Kethver collective consciousness was vast, containing the absorbed minds of millions of species from across multiple realities. Once inside, it would be easy to become lost in the maze of alien thoughts and never find a way out. But Helen and her crew had spent 300 years learning to maintain their humanity while gaining godlike powers. If anyone could survive inside the collective and come back out, it was them. "I'm going in," Helen announced. "Not alone," said Dr. Alan Parker. "We're all going. That's what we do. We face the impossible together." One by one, the crew of the Wanderer linked their consciousness together and dove into the alien collective mind. What they found, there was a nightmare beyond description. Millions of enslaved minds, trapped in an endless web of alien thought. Species that had been consumed centuries ago, their individuality crushed and their knowledge absorbed, but scattered throughout the collective, were islands of human consciousness. People from parallel realities where Earth had fallen, but who had somehow managed to maintain their sense of self, even while imprisoned in the hive mind. Helen reached out to them, her enhanced abilities allowing her to communicate across the boundaries of individual consciousness. We're here to get you out. Hold on to who you are. Remember what makes you human. The rescue operation was like nothing that had ever been attempted. Helen and her crew moved through the collective consciousness, gathering up human minds and shielding them from the alien influence. They found soldiers, scientists, civilians, even children who had been absorbed by the HFY, but had never stopped fighting to remain themselves. The collective consciousness realized what was happening and tried to stop them. Waves of alien thought crashed against the human rescuers, trying to overwhelm them and add them to the hive mind. But Helen's crew had learned to be more than human while remaining fundamentally human at their core. Their individual personalities were too strong to be absorbed. Got them, Chris reported. All the human consciousness from the parallel realities. They're free. But freeing the human prisoners was only the first step. Now they had to get everyone out of the collective consciousness before the HFY could trap them all. Helen felt the alien collective beginning to collapse as the human minds were removed from it. The HFY had become dependent on the knowledge and creativity they had stolen from other species. Without those enslaved minds, their ability to adapt and learn was severely damaged. Everyone out now, Helen commanded. The crew of the Wanderer pulled back from the collective consciousness, bringing with them hundreds of thousands of human minds from parallel realities. As they escaped, the HFY collective began to fragment, losing the coherent thought that had made them so dangerous. Back in normal space, the alien fleet was in chaos. Without the collective consciousness to coordinate their actions, individual, HFY ships began to panic. They had never had to think for themselves before, and they didn't know how to function as individuals. The dimensional rifts that had brought the reinforcements began to collapse as the HFY lost control of their reality-spanning technology. Ships from parallel universes found themselves trapped in a reality where their collective consciousness was broken. It's working, Nicole Evans reported. The rifts are closing. The HFY fleet is breaking apart. Helen smiled grimly. The battle was almost over, but there was still one more thing they had to do. The human minds they had rescued from the collective consciousness needed new bodies, new lives in this reality where they could be free. Prepare the consciousness transfer. Chambers, she ordered. We're going to give these people a second chance at life. The battle was ending, but the work was just beginning. Captain Helen Torres watched as the last of the dimensional rifts collapsed, cutting off the HFY's connection to their parallel reality reinforcements. The alien fleet was scattered and broken, their collective consciousness shattered by the loss of the enslaved minds that had given them their strength. Status report, Helen called to her crew. All dimensional rifts closed, reported Lieutenant Nicole Evans. The HFY fleet is in full retreat. Most of their ships are dead in space, unable to function without the collective consciousness to guide them. Dr. Emma Collins looked up from her station with wonder in her eyes. Captain, something amazing is happening. The individual HFY that we separated from the collective consciousness are showing signs of independent thought. Some of them are trying to communicate with us. Helen felt a spark of hope. If the HFY could exist as individuals rather than a hive mind, maybe they could be saved rather than destroyed. The aliens had been victims too, consumed by a collective consciousness that had robbed them of their individuality millions of years ago. Open a channel to the nearest HFY ship, Helen ordered. the alien that appeared on their communication screen looked different from the others they had encountered. Its eyes showed intelligence and confusion, but also something that might have been gratitude. I remember, the alien said slowly. I remember being myself before the collective took me. My name was Keth Volume. I was a scientist on my home world before we were absorbed into the hive mind. Helen smiled. Hello, Keth Volume. My name is Helen Torres. We're here to help you. The conversation that followed changed everything. Keth Volume explained that his species had been peaceful explorers before they encountered the entity that turned them into a collective consciousness. For millions of years, they had been forced to consume other civilizations against their will, their individual personalities buried beneath the alien influence. We never wanted this, Keth Volume said, his voice full of pain. The collective made you into monsters. We destroyed so many worlds, absorbed so many species. Can we ever be forgiven? Helen thought about the human minds they had rescued from the collective consciousness. People from parallel realities who had suffered under Kethvar. Rule, but who are now free to live again. Forgiveness is earned through actions, not words. Help us undo the damage that was done. Over the next several hours, the crew of the Wanderer worked with the freed Kethvar to shut down the reality-spanning network that had allowed the collective consciousness to spread across multiple dimensions. It was delicate work, requiring them to carefully dismantle technology that operated on principles beyond normal understanding. Dr. Alan Parker and the alien scientists worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hidden for millennia. The Kethvar had absorbed the wisdom of countless civilizations, and now that information could be used for good instead of conquest. The collective consciousness wasn't truly destroyed, Parker explained to Helen. It retreated to a dimension between realities where it's trying to rebuild itself. We need to make sure it can never return. Engineer Katie Logan was working with Kethvar technicians to create permanent barriers between dimensions. If we can stabilize the reality boundaries, the collective won't be able to cross over into our universe again. Meanwhile, the Federation fleet was dealing with the aftermath of the battle. Admiral Lisa Carter coordinated rescue operations for the crews of damaged ships, while also trying to process what she had witnessed. I've been in the military for 30 years, Carter told Captain Ryan Hughes, and I've never seen anything like what that ship can do. They didn't just defeat the enemy. They saved the enemy from themselves. The consciousness transfer chambers aboard the Wanderer were working constantly. The human minds that had been rescued from the collective consciousness were being given new bodies, cloned from genetic material that the ship had preserved during its long journey. It was a second chance at life for people who had been enslaved for decades or even centuries. Lieutenant Amy Brooks from the Federation fleet was among the first to meet the rescued humans. Many of them were versions of people she knew from her own reality, but who had lived through very different experiences. It's strange, one of the rescued women told Amy. I remember being captured by the Kethvar, being forced into their collective mind. But I also remember fighting to stay myself, to remember what it meant to be human. That memory of humanity is what kept me alive in there. Major Chris Davis was training some of the rescued humans in the enhanced abilities that the Wanderers' crew possessed. Not all of them wanted such power, but some were eager to help protect their new reality from future threats. The key is balance, Chris explained to a group of volunteers. We gained incredible abilities, but we never forgot what made us human. Compassion, creativity, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Those are the things that make us strong. Commander Kelly Wright was working with Admiral Carter to establish new defense protocols. The war had shown that threats to the galaxy could come from sources that conventional military thinking couldn't handle. We need to be ready for enemies that operate outside normal spacetime, Wright explained. The Wanderer can't be everywhere. At once, we need to train Federation forces to recognize and respond to reality-level threats. As the days passed, a new order began to emerge. The freed Kethvar were working to undo the damage their collective consciousness had caused. They shared technology and knowledge with the Federation, helping to rebuild the worlds that had been destroyed. The Wanderer established a permanent base at the edge of Federation space, becoming humanity's first line of defense against cosmic scale threats. Helen created the Threshold Guard, an organization dedicated to protecting reality itself from entities that sought to consume or control it. We learned something important during our journey, Helen explained to the first class of Threshold. Guard recruits. Power without wisdom is dangerous. Strength without compassion is meaningless. We became more than human, but we never stopped being human. The recruits came from many species, not just humans. Some were Federation officers who had shown exceptional courage during the war. Others were former Kethvar who wanted to atone for the crimes their collective consciousness had committed. A few were rescued humans from parallel realities who had unique insights into fighting reality-spanning threats. Dr. Collins worked to understand the entity that had created the Kethvar collective consciousness. It's still out there, she warned. Helen, somewhere in the spaces between realities, trying to find a way back. It feeds on consumed consciousness, growing stronger with every civilization it absorbs. Then we'll be ready for it, Helen replied. The galaxy is protected now by people who understand that some threats require more than conventional weapons to defeat. The Federation began to expand its understanding of what was possible. Ships equipped with Wanderer-enhanced technology could operate partially outside normal spacetime, making them immune to many reality-level attacks. The knowledge shared by the freed Kethvar allowed them to detect dimensional incursions before they became serious threats. Years passed, and the galaxy entered a new age of cooperation and growth. The war had brought together species that had never worked closely before, united by their shared experience of facing an existential threat. Helen often stood on the Wanderer's observation deck, looking out at the stars and thinking about the journey that had brought them here. They had left Earth as humans seeking to protect their species. They had returned as something more, but with their humanity intact. Do you ever regret what we became? Danny asked her one day. His consciousness still guided the ship, but he had grown and evolved during their long mission. No, Helen replied. We made the right choice. We gained the power to protect the galaxy, but we kept the wisdom to use that power responsibly. That's what makes us human. The ship they had dismissed, as Folklore had become the foundation of a new era. An era where humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their evolved abilities, but their stubborn refusal to stop caring about others, no matter how far they had traveled or how much they had changed. The Wanderer continued its patrol of the dimensional boundaries, ensuring that the peace they had won would last. And in the depths of space, other young species looked up at the stars and wondered what was possible when intelligence was combined with courage and power, was tempered by compassion. The legend had become real, and the galaxy was better for it.